Hello everyone, and welcome back to my 2020 election series, and also welcome back my air conditioning. Yes, I decided to, in an attempt to make it as professional as possible, get rid of the air conditioning for the election night video that I posted up on Saturday. And that was fun. Anyway, so today we're going to be reviewing the matchup between, the hypothetical matchup between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that any and all hypotheticals where I don't actually go over the scenario, like an election night, I'm going to assume that the economy has performed fairly well. And when I say fairly well, I'm talking, in 4 years, the Dow, which is the important one in the next few years, that's the important one to pay attention to. The three indices, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is the important one, because when that does well, you may as well just say the Democrat's not going to win. Okay? Because that is important, and I'm just going to highlight the region. That is important for these states, which represent 91 electoral votes, and actually, to a certain degree, it's important here and here, and to a lesser extent, these states. Yeah, there's actually significant manufacturing in these states. If it's doing extremely well, that area might actually become extremely competitive, which would be extremely weird. Like if it were to stay at 20% growth since the election, which, by the way, won't happen. But I'm operating under the assumption that it grows maybe 7 or 8% from pre-election 2016 numbers up to 2020, which would, along with the lesser growth of the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, which covers basically the rest of American economy in terms of, how they're performing, whether or not people are getting jobs, stuff like that, consumer confidence as well. Those are the indices that will, average it out and probably make it so that, the economy experiences about, 3, 4, 5% growth, which is what people were projecting. It was mostly actually 4 and 5% projections. A few people were conservative on their projections and assumed that we'd only reach 3%, but it looks like we're going to be on the higher end of the projections, so 4, 5, possibly even 6%. And what we're going to be looking at is just how we would fare under that assumption. I'm also going to assume that we haven't gotten into a war, because that's a whole different story, and that can throw elections off majorly in both directions. Both for the incumbent who started the war or was involved in starting the war, or the challenger, depending on how popular the war is and whether or not it was actually necessary. Now, let's talk about Senator Kamala Harris from California, okay? She is, extremely popular among Democrats, and she's a little bit more progressive than Hillary. She's somewhere in between Hillary and Sanders in that regard, politically speaking. But I think she'd have similar issues to the way Clinton campaigned. I think she's going to, and it seemed seems like this is going to be the Democrats' strategy, is to double down on their strategy from 2016, but with a more anti-Trump twist. And I think that's going to hurt her in the long run. The reason why I think Sherrod Brown and a few other candidates I have on the list that we're going to be getting to, so that would be my candidates 7 and 8, who, even though I've put them under less serious candidates, I think they would still have a chance, and actually would have a better chance than maybe even some established politicians and establishment Democrats, is because I think they are smart enough to run as their own candidate and say, vote for me, don't vote against Trump. Unfortunately, I think Kamala Harris is going to double down on the 2016 campaign message, which I just don't think is a good idea. So we're going to kind of go in order from, well, duh states to, well, not so much states. And under a normal scenario, we're going to expect Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas. I'm going to fill this in and leave Nebraska's 2nd district up just for a second because, you know, it is kind of important to look at sometime a little bit. Kansas, Oklahoma, I expect Trump to put, you know, Texas out of play completely. It'll probably be 12, 13, maybe even 14. Let's go Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Missouri. I think Iowa's actually out of play for 2016 unless you run an extremely strong Democrat who is from the Midwest or even from Iowa. Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, South Carolina. I think these states are, no matter how, are just completely out of, Indiana as well. I think these states are just completely out of play. And for Trump, states that are completely out of play are here. I'm even going to put New Mexico in that category. Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. The district is, of course, way out of play. So the 2nd congressional district in Maine is going to be solid Trump, and the 1st is going to be solid Harris. Also Illinois. Okay, so this is what the battleground looks like going into 2020. Democrats appear to have a slight advantage, but that's kind of where the advantage ends. And this is where it starts. Dang it, not what I meant to do. Sorry about that. But, you know, honestly, the Democrat advantage stops here, okay? And now we're going to go here and include the likelies and the leans. There are 180 votes up for grabs. But this is where Democrats should be scared. Yes, they will pick up states like Nevada and Colorado. I expect those gaps to widen, actually, as they start transitioning into blue states. Arizona is going to lean towards Trump. This is going to be a likely Trump just because it's in Nebraska, and I just don't think Harris can compete in Republican suburbs, no matter how controversial Trump is. And this is especially if the economy is performing, where I'm going to assume it does, which is in accordance with most projections. We can take Georgia off the map and put it as a likely. We can also take North Carolina off the map. And we can also take Ohio off the map. Now, Ohio is going to be close to, if not above, a 10-point margin in this scenario. and this is where Democrats really have issues. Their path is going to have to include the upper Midwest. The problem is playing a 2016 style campaign, which everything the establishment Democrats seem to be doing right now indicates that they're going to be trying to repeat that, says that I just don't think they can pull it off. And just giving those 3 states to Trump indicates that he wins. I just don't think they can pull it off. Maybe they're able to flip Minnesota back, or not Minnesota, but Michigan back by a very tiny amount. Guess what? Trump can pick up New Hampshire. It was the closest state in 2016, both vote total-wise and percentage. And I think with the incumbency advantage, he picks it up. I'm going to go ahead and leave these states off just for the sake of argument right now, because they are an interesting area, and I kind of want to talk about, you know, looking forward as well. Okay, so, and I think if he wins New Hampshire, it's going to indicate that he performed well enough to pick up those 2 votes in Maine. I really do think he could easily pick up Maine's votes. On to the Sunshine State. I don't think he's going to lose 2 points that quickly. And at this point, he only needs 1 of these 5 states. Harris needs them all. Let me repeat that. Trump only needs 1 of them. And to show that, I just clicked one of the 2 lowest vote totals out of those. Trump needs just 1 of these states. And because of his incumbency advantage, he's going to get it somewhere. Wisconsin, in my opinion, would be the most likely. If he was only to win 1 of these 5, it would be Wisconsin. Just because the state looks to be the one that's trending Republican the most. And since the year 2000, these states have been trending Republican to begin with. And what I mean by that is if you look at whether the state votes more Democratic than the nation as a whole, more, you know, just about the same as the nation as a whole, or more Republican than the nation as a whole, these states have shifted from voting much more Democrat than the nation as a whole to shifting slightly more Republican than the nation as a whole. And what I mean by that is, you know, these states weren't exactly competitive, you know, in 2000. To a degree they were. In 2004, they were still more Democrat than the nation as a whole by a decent margin. 2008, they were at a similar margin, believe it or not, in terms of whether they were more Democrat or more Republican. Because Obama won by 7 points nationally, I think, and he won a lot of these states by 10 points. 2008, he won by 3 points, but in a lot of these states, he only won by, you know, he won similar margins. 2016, they voted, you know, between 3 and 4, even, yeah, between 3 and, Hillary won by, what, 3 points? When I say 1, I mean she got a plurality by, what, 3 points in 2016? It was either 2 or 3. So these states voted at, you know, between 2 and 4 points more Republican than the nation as a whole. And Minnesota voted essentially like the nation as a whole. And Virginia wasn't that much more Democrat than the nation as a whole. And I don't think that trend is going to stop. It's going to become more and more Republican up there. And that's why I think he would be able to repeat in Pennsylvania. I think he would be able to repeat in Michigan. He'd be able to flip Minnesota as well, I think, in this scenario. Because he was extremely close to Clinton in that state. Closer than I think anybody expected. You know, I was expecting Clinton to win there by like 5 points. You know, 5 or 6 points. Instead, she was close to actually losing it. It was like 1.4 points. You know. Virginia, for the benefit, I'm going to say Kamala Harris still wins the state. It's extremely difficult for a Republican to win in Virginia. You really have to turn out Southwest Virginia. I think if the Dow Jones were to hit 24,000, it becomes impossible for a Democrat to win Virginia, at least at the federal level. State level is a whole different story, because state level is always a whole different story. I mean, Massachusetts isn't exactly shy about, having Republican governors. They do it quite often, actually. But this is where I think an election between Trump and Harris would be, if we assume that the economy performs, only half as well as it has in the first few months of Trump's presidency, and we assume that Kamala Harris, continues the strategy that, the Democrats played in 2016 and doesn't try to play up in this area. If she does try to temper her strategy more for the upper Midwest in order to attempt to flip, all of these states, and by the way, if she were to flip all of these, she would win all 4 of them. I think she could pick off, Minnesota and Michigan, because those are a little more liberal than Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. I think those would be the states that she'd be able to pick off, but I don't think it would be enough. She would need to flip Florida, which, if Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are going to the Republican, I do honestly think Florida would go to the Republican as well. So, this is my prediction for a Trump versus Harris election as it stands right now. Things can obviously change, and of course I could be very, very wrong. But I've tried to put my thoughts and my reasons why I'm predicting it like this in the video. And I'm going to try to, and I'm trying not to be, biased in any way, shape, or form. I am just extremely skeptical of, the Democrats' ability to temper their image in the upper Midwest and stop the trend that is going on up there of this region becoming more Republican. And I'm not sure if they can counter it just yet by expanding in the South and Southwest. I just don't think it's enough right now. To the point where if by some miracle the Democrats won Texas in 2020, with the rest of the states going the way I've predicted them, the Republican still wins. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and have a nice day.